What would you do if, at a family gathering, your parents looked you in the eye and told you that everything you'd ever hoped to inherit was never meant for you, that the blood, sweat, and loyalty you gave meant nothing, the years of sacrifice, the missed opportunities, the constant struggle to prove yourself all dismissed with a casual announcement over dinner that night at my family's lakeside estate when they declared I wasn't their heir? I felt my world crumble, but they didn't know about the documents in my purse or the truth I was about to unleash. Stick around because the moment I revealed what I had prepared in secret, the room went dead silent. My name is Emily Carter, and at 29 years old, I've spent my entire life as the invisible daughter in a family that only had eyes for my older brother. Growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, you'd think being part of the prestigious Carter family would have opened doors for me. My parents, Robert and Elaine Carter, built Carter Developments from a small contracting business into one of the most successful mid-sized construction and real estate firms in northeastern Ohio. Their name carried weight in every boardroom from downtown Cleveland to the suburbs of Shaker Heights. But that name, that legacy, was never meant for me. From the moment Michael was born, 3 years before me, he was the heir apparent, the golden son, the future of Carter Developments. I watched as Dad took him to construction sites on Saturdays, teaching him to read blueprints before he could properly tie his shoes. Mom enrolled him in private tutoring sessions with retired executives who'd built empires of their own. For his 16th birthday, they gifted him a BMW and an internship at the company. For mine, a used Honda Civic and a lecture about being practical and grateful. While Michael was groomed for greatness, I was told to find my own way. "You're smart enough, Emily," Dad would say, not looking up from his newspaper. "You don't need us holding your hand." So I didn't let them. I put myself through college at Case Western Reserve University, working nights at a downtown restaurant to cover what my partial scholarship didn't. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business administration, hoping foolishly that academic excellence might finally earn me a seat at the family table. It didn't. When I asked about joining Carter Developments after graduation, Mom's response cut deeper than any rejection letter ever could. "Sweetheart, the construction industry isn't really suited for women. Why don't you look into something more appropriate, maybe event planning or human resources?" So I built my own career from scratch. I started as an entry-level coordinator at Lakefront Realty Group, a local firm that competed with my family's business in the residential market. I worked 60-hour weeks, studying market trends until 2 in the morning, analyzing property valuations until my eyes burned. Within 5 years, I'd climbed to project manager, overseeing multi-million-dollar developments along Lake Erie's shoreline. But here's what my family never knew every night after work. I'd spend another 3 hours teaching myself what they'd refused to show me. I enrolled in online courses for real estate law, downloaded textbooks on development finance, studied zoning regulations and environmental impact assessments. I built spreadsheets analyzing Carter Development's public filings, tracking their expansion patterns, understanding their vulnerabilities. My tiny apartment in Ohio City became a war room, its walls covered with maps marking every property my family owned, every project they'd announced, every competitor they'd crushed. My colleagues at Lakefront thought I was obsessed with success. They were wrong. I was obsessed with preparation. Because deep down, I knew this day would come, the day my parents would make their favoritism official, would look me in the eye and tell me I was never part of their plan. I'd seen it in every dismissive glance, every forgotten birthday, every family photo where I stood slightly apart from their perfect trio. The irony was that I understood Carter Developments better than Michael ever could. While he was burning through company credit cards at exclusive country clubs and taking extended business trips to Vegas, I was learning the actual business. I knew which contractors they relied on, which permits were vulnerable to challenge, which expansion projects were over-leveraged. Knowledge, I'd learned, was the only inheritance that couldn't be taken away. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. I was reviewing contracts for a waterfront condo development when my phone buzzed with Dad's number, a rare enough occurrence that my assistant asked if everything was okay. Emily. His voice was formal, businesslike, as if I were a client rather than his daughter. We're hosting a family gathering this Saturday at the estate. 7 o'clock sharp. Don't be late. What's the occasion? I asked, but he'd already hung up. The Carter estate in Shaker Heights sprawled across 12 acres of manicured perfection, complete with a private lake, tennis courts, and a mansion that looked more like a country club than a home. As Saturday approached, an uncomfortable anxiety settled in my chest. Dad never called family gatherings. The last one had been 5 years ago, to announce Michael's promotion to Vice President of Operations, a title that came with a corner office and 0 actual responsibilities. Something big is happening, Aunt Joanna whispered when she called Thursday night. She was Mom's younger sister, the only family member who ever checked on me. Your mother's been planning this for weeks. She's invited everyone, the cousins from Columbus, business partners, even the Hendersons from next door. Whatever they're announcing, they want witnesses. My stomach turned. Public announcements meant public commitments, things that couldn't be taken back. Friday evening at 8:30, I was stress cleaning my apartment when a knock came at my door. No one visited me here. I'd deliberately chosen this converted warehouse specifically for its anonymity. Through the peephole, I saw a courier holding an envelope. Emily Carter. He asked when I opened the door. Yes. This requires a signature. The envelope was expensive cream paper, the kind my parents used for their most formal correspondence. But there was no return address, no company logo. Inside, a single sheet of paper bore one handwritten line in shaky script I recognized immediately my grandfather's handwriting, though he'd been dead for 2 years. The truth is already in your hands, don't let them silence you. My hands trembled as I read it again. Grandpa Joseph had been the only one who'd ever believed in me, who'd seen past my parents' blindness. Before dementia claimed his final years, he'd pulled me aside at Christmas and whispered, "You're the smart one, Emily. Remember that when the time comes." But this note, how was this possible? I studied the paper, the ink. It looked fresh, recent. Someone had kept this, waited for the right moment to send it. Someone who knew what was coming. Saturday arrived gray and oppressive, matching my mood. I changed outfits 3 times before settling on a navy dress that said professional but not trying too hard. As I drove through Shaker Heights' tree-lined streets, past estates that reeked of old money and older secrets, I found myself gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Michael's Porsche was already in the circular drive when I arrived at 6:45. Through the massive windows, I could see figures moving inside, lots of them. This wasn't just family. Half of Cleveland's business elite appeared to be here. Emily. Mom's voice rang out as I entered the foyer. She was wearing her favorite Saint Laurent dress, the one she saved for charity galas and power plays. "You're early. How unusual." Michael stood by the marble fireplace, whiskey in hand, surrounded by a circle of Dad's golf buddies. He caught my eye and raised his glass in a mock toast, that infuriating smirk playing at his lips. He'd gained weight recently, his face bloated from too many liquid lunches. But somehow that only made him look more like Dad, the same entitled expression, the same casual cruelty in his eyes. "Big night, little sister," he said as I passed. "Hope you're ready for some changes." The dining room had been set for 40 people, place cards positioned with military precision. Mine was at the far end of the table, between Cousin Martha, who only talked about her cats, and Uncle Frank, who'd been deaf since the Clinton administration. Michael, of course, sat at Dad's right hand. As guests filed in, I recognized faces from the business pages. Investors, lawyers, city councilmen. Whatever was happening tonight, my parents wanted it witnessed, documented, made irreversible. The anxiety in my chest morphed into something sharper, more dangerous. They were going to publicly cut me out of something. The only question was what? Dinner was a carefully orchestrated performance. 7 courses of continental cuisine, each paired with wines from Dad's personal collection, bottles he usually reserved for closing million-dollar deals. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Mergers, acquisitions, the new waterfront development that would transform Cleveland's skyline. I pushed salmon around my plate and waited for the axe to fall. It came between the main course and dessert. Dad stood, tapping his crystal glass with a silver spoon until the room fell silent. He was in his element here, commanding attention in his charcoal Tom Ford suit, every inch the successful patriarch. "Friends, family, esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice carrying that practiced authority that had intimidated contractors for 30 years. "Elaine and I have invited you here tonight to share an important announcement about the future of Carter Developments." My mother stood beside him, her hand on his arm, her smile as perfectly constructed as her facelift. The chandelier light caught her diamond necklace, sending prisms across the walls like scattered promises. "As you all know," Dad continued, "Carter Developments has been our life's work. From a single pickup truck and a handful of tools, we've built an empire worth $200 million. Appreciative murmurs rippled through the room. "But every empire needs clear succession, strong leadership, unquestionable authority." Here it comes, I thought, my fingernails digging crescents into my palms under the table. "That's why tonight, before all of you as witnesses, we're officially announcing that our son, Michael Carter, will inherit controlling interest in Carter Developments. 70% of all shares will transfer to him upon our retirement, or—" He paused for effect. "Should anything happen to us—" The room erupted in congratulations. Michael stood, accepting handshakes and backslaps like a politician on election night. But I noticed the careful eyes of several investors, the way they glanced at me, waiting. "As for our daughter, Emily—" Mom's voice cut through the celebration like a blade through silk. The room quieted again. "She has chosen her own path, working for another firm. We respect her independence, which is why she will not be included as an heir to Carter Developments. We believe this is best for the stability and future of the company. Not included as an heir." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Gasps echoed through the room. Aunt Joanna's hand flew to her mouth. Even the investors looked shocked. It was one thing to favor a son, another to completely disinherit a daughter in front of Cleveland's business elite. "Emily has never shown interest in the family business," Dad added, not even looking at me. "She's never been cut out for leadership. This arrangement simply acknowledges what has always been true." I felt 40 pairs of eyes on me, waiting for tears, for drama, for the scorned daughter to make a scene. The humiliation was total, calculated, public. They'd brought all these people here to make sure everyone knew Emily Carter was nothing, not an heir, not a daughter, just an inconvenient footnote in the Carter family legacy. Michael raised his glass toward me, his smirk widening. "To family," he said, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. "And knowing one's place." The room held its breath. This was my moment to react, to give them the spectacle they expected. The hurt little girl running from the table in tears, the angry daughter making threats she couldn't keep, the pathetic outsider finally understanding she'd never belonged. Instead, I set down my napkin with deliberate calm. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress, and looked directly at my parents. Mom's smile wavered slightly. She'd expected tears. Dad's jaw tightened. He'd expected rage. "Thank you for the clarity," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. It's always helpful when people show you exactly who they are. I walked toward the door, my heels clicking against the marble floor in measured beats. Behind me, the whispers started shocked relatives, confused business partners, the social elite catching the scent of scandal. But I didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing what was really burning inside me. It was only when I reached the hallway that I heard Michael's voice, loud and mocking. "Don't take it too hard. Some people are meant to lead, others, well, they're meant to follow." The front door was within reach when Mom caught my arm. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into my skin. "You're embarrassing us," she hissed. "Go back in there and congratulate your brother properly." I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who'd given birth to me but never truly seen me. "The only embarrassment in that room," I said quietly, "is a mother who just sold her daughter's birthright for appearances." Her face flushed beneath her foundation. "You should focus on finding a husband. Emily, that's where your value lies, not in boardrooms or businesses you don't understand." I pulled my arm free and walked out into the night, leaving behind the estate, the guests, and the family that had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They thought they'd humiliated me. They had no idea they'd just lit a fuse. The truth about revenge is that it requires patience. Most people think it's about explosive moments, dramatic confrontations. But real revenge is like construction. You lay the foundation brick by brick, long before anyone notices you're building anything at all. My foundation had started 13 months ago, the day I discovered Michael's gambling problem. I'd been having lunch at the Ritz-Carlton downtown when I spotted him at the bar at 1:15 in the afternoon, slurring his words to a man in an expensive suit who looked like he broke kneecaps for a living. Michael slid a check across the bar, a Carter Developments check. The man pocketed it and left Michael crying into his whiskey. That night, I started digging. Using my real estate connections and some carefully placed bribes to courthouse clerks, I uncovered a web of debt that would make a loan shark blush. Michael had borrowed against company assets, taken out personal loans using his future inheritance as collateral. And this was the beautiful part: he'd been desperately trying to hide it all from our parents. But I didn't stop there. Through my work at Lakefront, I'd learned that information was only powerful if you could act on it. So I created Buckeye Holdings LLC, a shell company registered in Delaware with anonymous ownership, clean, legal, untraceable to me. Then I started buying land, not just any land-specific parcels around Cleveland that seemed worthless to everyone except someone who'd studied Carter Development's expansion plans. A contaminated lot in Ohio City that would be perfect once cleaned. A strip of riverfront property too narrow to develop alone, but essential for anyone wanting to build next to it. 14 parcels in total, acquired over 10 months, each one strategically chosen. The sellers thought they were lucky to unload these worthless properties. They had no idea they were selling the missing pieces to Carter Development's 5-year plan, parcels my father needed to complete his legacy project, a $200 million mixed-use development called Carter Plaza. The most crucial discovery came 6 months ago. While reviewing old county records at 2 in the morning, fueled by black coffee and spite, I found something extraordinary. Before his death, Grandpa Joseph had secured several liens against Carter Development's properties, liens that had never been properly discharged. The paperwork was complicated, buried in decades of legal filings, but it was there. And according to Ohio state law, those liens could be transferred to any direct descendant who could prove financial harm from the company. I'd photographed everything, hired a discreet attorney in Columbus to verify the documents, and kept it all in a safety deposit box at a bank my family didn't use. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Morse who specialized in corporate litigation, had whistled low when she saw the papers. "This is a nuclear option," she'd said. "If you use this, you could take control of significant company assets." "I know," I'd replied. "That's the point." The mysterious note in my grandfather's handwriting, I'd found it in his personal effects that Mom had thrown away without looking through. Grandpa had written dozens of notes in his final lucid months, hidden them in books, tucked them in folders. This one had been inside his copy of The Art of War, bookmarked at a chapter about patience and timing. I'd kept it, waiting for the right moment to remind myself that someone in this family had once believed in me. 3 weeks before the family gathering, I'd noticed unusual activity in Carter Development's financial filings. They were restructuring debt, consolidating ownership, preparing for something big. When Dad called about the gathering, I knew what was coming. So I prepared my own surprise. I spent those 3 weeks assembling everything into a comprehensive package, Financial records showing Michael's embezzlement because that's what it was when you used company funds to pay gambling debts. Documentation of the land parcels that would cripple Carter Plaza without my cooperation. The liens that could challenge my parents' control of their own company. I loaded it all onto an encrypted flash drive and created a presentation that would destroy their carefully constructed empire in 15 slides. Patricia had reviewed everything one last time the night before the gathering. "This is bulletproof," she'd said. "But once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. Your family will never forgive you." "They just disinherited me in front of 40 witnesses," I'd reminded her. "There's nothing left to forgive." I also reached out to 3 major investors in Carter Developments, people I'd met through Lakefront who had no idea about my family connection. I suggested they might want to attend Saturday's gathering, hinting that major announcements affecting their investments would be made. They showed up, eager to protect their money. The morning of the gathering, I'd transferred all the documentation to my phone and the flash drive. I'd practiced my presentation until I could deliver it without notes, without hesitation. I'd chosen my words carefully, not emotional accusations, but cold, legal facts that would stand up in court. They thought they were destroying me that night. They were actually handing me the stage for the performance of a lifetime. I sat in my car outside the estate for 20 minutes after walking out, watching through the massive windows as the party continued without me. The champagne flowed, the laughter echoed across the grounds, and my family celebrated their successful excision of the unwanted daughter. Perfect. Let them think they'd won. I drove home, changed into jeans and a sweater, and waited. Patricia had advised me to give them time to get comfortable, maybe even a little drunk. "The best counterattack comes when your opponent thinks the battle is over," she'd said. At 9:45, my phone buzzed. "Aunt Joanna." "Honey, are you okay?" "That was absolutely cruel what they did." "I'm fine," I lied. "Is everyone still there?" "Yes, they're serving after-dinner drinks in the great room. Emily, the way they're talking about you. Michael's holding court, telling everyone how you were never really part of the business anyway. Your mother is acting like she did you a favor." Perfect. The more confident they felt, the harder they'd fall. At 10:15, I drove back to the estate. The valet looked confused when I handed him my keys again. "Forgot something," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The great room was exactly as I'd pictured 40 of Cleveland's most influential people, relaxed and tipsy, sprawled across leather couches and standing in clusters. The massive 70-inch screen on the wall was displaying a slideshow of Carter Development's greatest hits. How convenient. I walked in through the side entrance, flash drive in my pocket, phone ready. Several heads turned. Conversations stuttered to a stop. "Emily." Dad's voice was sharp, annoyed. "What are you doing back here?" Michael laughed from his position by the fireplace, where he was regaling investors with some fabricated story about a deal he'd closed. "Can't stay away. Sis, I get it. It's hard to accept you're not part of this." He walked over, whiskey sloshing in his glass, and stood too close. His breath reeked of alcohol and entitlement. "Look, I know tonight was tough, but it's for the best. You were never good enough for this business. Hell, you couldn't even get a job here without Daddy's help." "You're right, Michael," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. I couldn't get a job at Carter Developments, so I had to learn the business elsewhere. Want to know what I learned? Before he could respond, I walked to the entertainment system and plugged in my flash drive. My fingers moved across the control tablet, overriding the slideshow. "What the hell are you doing?" Dad started toward me, but I'd already hit play. The first slide filled the screen, "Carter Developments, a Financial Analysis." "I thought everyone here should know what they're really investing in," I announced, turning to face the room. "Especially since you've just witnessed the transfer of controlling interest to Michael." Mom stood up. "Emily, stop this immediately." The next slide appeared, a spreadsheet showing withdrawals from Carter Development's accounts, each one traced to Michael's personal expenses, Vegas trips, private poker games, A particularly damaging payment to someone named Vincent the Hammer Torino. Gasps rippled through the room. Michael's face went from red to white. That's fake, he sputtered. Really? I clicked to the next slide, canceled checks with his signature. Carter Development's routing number clearly visible. These are from public bankruptcy filings of your creditors. Michael. Amazing what becomes public record when people don't get paid. Dad stepped forward. You're destroying your brother out of spite. I'm not done. The next slide showed debt ratios, leveraged assets, properties double mortgaged without investor knowledge. Carter Developments is overleveraged by 40%. The only reason you haven't defaulted is because you've been hiding the real numbers through subsidiary shells. The investors were on their feet now, phones out, probably calling their lawyers. Robert Henderson, who'd sunk $8 million into Carter Developments, looked murderous. But here's my favorite part, I continued, clicking to a map of Cleveland with 14 red dots. These are parcels of land Carter Developments needs for Carter Plaza, your $200 million legacy project, the one you've already pre-sold to investors. Mom's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. How do you know about that? Because I own them, every single one. I clicked to the next slide showing the deeds, all registered to Buckeye Holdings, LLC. Without these parcels, Carter Plaza is dead. You can't build around them, the zoning won't allow it. You can't proceed without them. The City Planning Commission requires contiguous development. The room erupted. Investors shouting questions, family members demanding explanations. Michael stumbling toward me with rage in his eyes. You little bitch, he slurred, grabbing my arm. You think you can? I'd be careful, Michael. I pulled out my phone, showing him an email queue ready to send. One tap, and every document I've shown tonight goes to the SEC, the Ohio Attorney General, and the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Your gambling debts, the embezzlement, all of it. He released me like I was made of fire. Dad's voice boomed across the chaos. You're still our daughter. You wouldn't destroy your own family. Wouldn't I? I looked him straight in the eye. You just told 40 people I wasn't good enough to be your heir, that I've never been cut out for leadership. So let me show you exactly what kind of leader I am. I clicked to the final slide, the liens Grandpa Joseph had secured, with legal documentation showing my right to claim them. These liens give me the legal standing to file for receivership of Carter Development's next project, which means I turned to address the room. I now control the future of this company, whether you like it or not. The screen glowed with undeniable proof, legal documents, bank records, contracts, each one a nail in the coffin of my family's carefully constructed lie. The room had devolved into chaos. Robert Henderson was on his phone with his lawyer. Other investors huddled in corners, voices rising with each passing second. But I kept my eyes on my parents, watching their empire crumble in real time. This is illegal, Dad roared, his face purple with rage. You stole this information. You. Everything I've shown is from public records or legally obtained through discovery provisions in Grandpa's estate documents. I interrupted calmly. Patricia Morse, my attorney, will be happy to verify that. She's actually waiting outside in case anyone has questions. Mom stepped forward, switching tactics from anger to manipulation. Emily, sweetheart, we can work this out as a family. There's no need for all this drama. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You announced my disinheritance like it was a celebration. You told me to focus on finding a husband because that's where my value lies. Now you want to play family. Michael, desperate and drunk, tried one last attack. Those parcels you claim to own will just buy them from you. Name your price. They're not for sale. Everything's for sale, he sneered. What do you want? $1 million, $5 million? I walked closer to him, close enough that only he could hear my next words, though I spoke loud enough for the nearest investors to catch it too. I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything you thought was yours, to be told you're worthless, to watch your future disappear in front of an audience. I stepped back, raising my voice. But since you asked $20 million per parcel, cash, that's $280 million total. Gasps echoed through the room. It was an impossible number, more than the company was worth. That's extortion, Dad bellowed. That's business, I replied. You taught me that. Oh, wait, you didn't teach me anything. I had to learn it myself. Thomas Brennan, one of the senior investors, stepped forward. Robert, is what she's saying. True about the debts. The leveraging. Dad's silence was damning. And Michael's gambling. Brennan continued. The company funds used for personal debts. Michael opened his mouth, closed it, looked to our parents for help that wasn't coming. I need answers. Robert, Brennan said, his voice deadly quiet. I've got $12 million invested in Carter Developments. Other investors joined in, surrounding my father, their voices growing angrier. Mom tried to calm them, but her practiced charm had lost its power. The facade had cracked, and everyone could see the rot beneath. Enough, I called out, and surprisingly, the room quieted. I'm not here to destroy Carter Developments despite what my family did to me tonight. I'm here with a proposal. Dad laughed bitterly. You expect us to negotiate with you after this ambush? You don't have a choice. I pulled out a folder I'd kept hidden in my coat. This is a restructuring plan. Michael steps down as heir and future CEO. The board, which will now include me, oversees a full financial audit. We clean up the debt, legitimize the operations, and salvage Carter Plaza with my land parcels as partnership equity. Not a sale. You want to take over, Mom said, her voice hollow. I want what I've earned, I corrected. I want what I've prepared for while you were grooming Michael to destroy what took you 30 years to build. Look at him, he can barely stand. This is who you chose over me! Michael lunged forward, stumbling. You vindictive little... He swung at me, a sloppy drunk punch that I easily sidestepped. He crashed into a side table, sending crystal glasses shattering across the floor. The sound seemed to break something in the room's atmosphere. Michael! Mom shrieked, rushing to help him up, but he pushed her away. Don't touch me, he slurred. This is your fault. You said she'd never fight back. You said she was weak. The investors were backing away now, some already heading for the door. This wasn't just a business crisis anymore. It was a public meltdown of one of Cleveland's most prominent families. Mr. Henderson, I called out to the lead investor as he passed. My attorney has a full copy of the restructuring proposal. If you and the other investors would like to review it, we can arrange a meeting Monday morning. Without the family drama. He paused, studied me for a long moment. You're nothing like your parents, are you? No, I said firmly. I'm not. He nodded slowly. Monday, 9 a.m. Our offices, not theirs. One by one, the other investors followed him out, each taking my business card, each avoiding eye contact with my parents. In 10 minutes, the room had emptied except for family and a few shell-shocked relatives. Aunt Joanna approached me quietly. That was incredible. Emily, terrifying, but incredible. Dad stood in the center of his great room, surveying the wreckage literal and metaphorical. Mom held Michael, who was now crying, mumbling about debts and threats and men who would hurt him if he didn't pay. You've destroyed us, Dad said quietly, not looking at me. Your own family. No, I said, gathering my things. You destroyed yourselves the moment you decided I was worthless. I just showed everyone else what you really are. The collapse came swiftly, like a controlled demolition where every support beam fails in sequence. You ungrateful bitch. Dad's composure finally shattered completely. He grabbed a whiskey bottle from the bar and hurled it against the wall, amber liquid and glass exploding across his precious Persian rug. After everything we gave you, gave me, I stood my ground as he advanced. You gave me nothing but lessons in neglect. Every sacrifice, every achievement, every dollar I earned myself. We fed you, we clothed you, we sent you to school. You did the legal minimum required of parents. Congratulations on not going to prison for child neglect. Mom tried her last weapon tears. They rolled down her cheeks, streaking her makeup into tragic lines. Emily, please, you're destroying your father, your brother. How can you be so cruel? How can I be so cruel? I repeated slowly, tasting the irony. You told me 20 minutes ago that my only value was in finding a husband. You announced to everyone who matters in Cleveland business that I'm worthless to you. And you're asking me about cruelty? Michael had collapsed on the couch, but his drunk rage wasn't finished. You think you've won, he slurred, trying to focus on me. You think those investors will work with you? You're nobody. You're just some bitter girl who couldn't handle the truth. The truth. I pulled out my phone and showed him another document. The truth is that you owe Vincent Torino $3.7 million. The truth is that he's been patient only because he thinks you're inheriting a fortune. What happens when he finds out you're not? Michael went white, suddenly sober. You wouldn't. I already did. I bought your debt from him this morning. Paid full price, too. He was very eager to be rid of you. I smiled coldly. You now owe me $3.7 million, due in 30 days. That's what the contract you signed says. I can't, I can't. Then I guess you'll be declaring personal bankruptcy. Hard to run a development company with that on your record. Dad stepped between us. You'd destroy your brother's life over this your own blood. Blood. I laughed bitterly. You disowned me 2 hours ago in front of everyone who matters. I'm not your daughter. Remember, I'm not your heir. So Michael's not my brother. He's just another debtor who's about to learn what accountability feels like. We'll fight you, Mom said, her tears drying into determination. We'll sue you for corporate espionage, for theft, for... Go ahead. I pulled out another document. This is a whistleblower complaint ready to file with the SEC. Michael's embezzlement, the fraud, the hidden debts, it's all there. You sue me, I file this. You'll spend the next 5 years in federal court, and probably the 5 after that in federal prison. The remaining relatives had pressed themselves against the walls, watching the Carter family dynasty implode like witnesses to a car crash, horrified but unable to look away. Uncle Frank, who everyone thought was too deaf to follow conversations, suddenly spoke up. Joseph always said Emily was the smart one. Guess he was right. Dad whirled on him. Don't you dare mention my father. Your father. I interjected. Grandpa Joseph left those liens specifically to ensure the company couldn't be mismanaged. He knew what you and Mom were doing. He saw how you treated me. Those notes he left, he prepared me for this moment. I pulled out the handwritten note, holding it up. The truth is already in your hands, don't let them silence you. I looked at each of them. He knew you'd try to silence me. He made sure I'd have the weapons to fight back. Lies, Mom shrieked. Dad was senile at the end. He didn't know what he was writing. Shh, senile. Aunt Joanna finally spoke up, her voice shaking with long suppressed anger. Joseph was sharp until his last breath. He told me he was leaving something for Emily, something to protect her from you two. I thought it was money, but this is so much better. The betrayal on Mom's face was exquisite. Joanna, you knew. I knew you were monsters to this girl. I watched you lavish everything on Michael while Emily fought for scraps. I said nothing for 29 years because I was a coward, but watching her tonight... Joanna moved to stand beside me. I've never been prouder of anyone in my life. Get out, Dad roared. All of you get out of my house. Actually, I said, pulling out one final document. About that. The estate is collateral for one of the liens. As of Monday, when I file for receivership, I'll have a legal claim on this property too. The silence that followed was complete. Total. The great room, which had hosted decades of Carter family triumphs, fell absolutely still. Even Michael's drunken mumbling ceased. Mom sank into a chair, her perfect posture finally breaking. Dad stood frozen, his mouth open but no words coming out. Michael stared at me like I was a stranger, which I suppose I was. The Emily they'd dismissed would never have been capable of this. "You wanted me to know my place," I said quietly, my voice carrying in the silence. "Well, I do. It's at the head of the table you tried to ban me from. It's in the boardroom you said I'd never understand. It's standing on the ashes of everything you built on cruelty and favoritism." I turned to leave, then stopped at the doorway for one last statement. "Monday, 9 a.m. Henderson's office. Come prepared to negotiate, or come prepared to lose everything. Your choice." I walked out of the great room, through the marble foyer, past the portraits of Carter family patriarchs who would have been appalled by what their descendants had become. Behind me, I heard Dad's voice, broken and disbelieving. How did we not see this coming?" Aunt Joanna's answer followed me into the night. "Because you never bothered to see her at all." The silence in that room was everything I'd imagined and more. Not the awkward silence of a paused conversation or the tense silence before an argument. This was the complete, absolute silence of devastation, the sound of a dynasty falling with no one left to catch it. I stood in the doorway for one last moment, memorizing the scene. My father, Robert Carter, the man who'd built an empire and lost it in a single evening, stood frozen like a statue carved from disbelief. My mother, always so perfectly composed, sat crumpled in her designer dress, mascara painting dark rivers down her cheeks. And Michael, the golden son, the chosen heir, lay sprawled on the Italian leather couch, his inheritance evaporated, his future destroyed, finally understanding what it felt like to be worthless in our parents' eyes. The relatives who remained were pressed against the walls like survivors of a bombing, afraid to move, afraid to speak, afraid to draw attention to themselves. Some were already edging toward the other exits, desperate to escape the toxic aftermath of the Carter family explosion. "Emily," Aunt Joanna called out, walking toward me with tears in her eyes, but these weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of something that looked almost like pride. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you tonight." I nodded, unable to trust my voice, because the truth was, despite everything, despite the years of neglect and dismissal, part of me had hoped they would choose differently. That faced with evidence of Michael's failures, they might finally see my worth. But they'd made their choice, publicly and irreversibly. Now I'd made mine. As I walked through the marble foyer one last time, past the oil paintings of Carter patriarchs and the crystal chandelier that cost more than most people's annual salaries, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. The anger that had driven me for 13 months, the hurt that had defined me for 29 years, began to dissipate like smoke in the wind. My heels clicked against the imported marble, each step taking me further from the life I'd been denied and closer to the one I'd built for myself. The front door, 12 feet tall, solid mahogany, designed to intimidate visitors, felt light as paper when I pushed it open. The October night air hit me like freedom itself. Behind me, I heard voices rising, Dad shouting at the remaining guests to leave, Mom sobbing about betrayal, Michael's incoherent rambling about debts and threats. But those sounds faded with each step toward my car. Patricia Morse was waiting by her BMW, having stayed outside as planned. She raised an eyebrow as I approached. "How did it go?" she asked, though the answer must have been written on my face. "Exactly as planned," I said. "They'll be at Henderson's office Monday morning. And if they don't show, then we file everything, SEC, Attorney General, the works. Either way, I win." She smiled, the sharp smile of a lawyer who loves watching justice served cold. "You know, in 20 years of practice, I've never seen anyone dismantle their opposition so thoroughly. You didn't just beat them, you broke them." "They broke themselves," I corrected. "I just held up the mirror." As I drove away from the Shaker Heights estate for the last time, my phone buzzed with messages. The investors wanted meetings. Reporters had somehow already heard whispers of the scandal. 3 competitors of Carter Developments wanted to discuss opportunities. By tomorrow morning, the entire Cleveland business community would know what had happened in that room. But I didn't read any of them. Instead, I drove to Lake Erie, to a small park where Grandpa Joseph used to take me when I was young, when my parents were too busy with Michael to notice I was gone. I sat on the same bench where he'd taught me to play chess, where he'd told me stories about building something from nothing, where he'd said the words I'd never forgotten. Your parents are fools, Emily. But foolish parents sometimes raise brilliant children. Be brilliant. The lake stretched out before me, dark and endless under the clouded moon. Somewhere behind me, the Cleveland skyline glowed with the promise of towers yet to be built, deals yet to be made, empires yet to rise or fall. Carter Developments would survive with me at the helm, or without the Carter name at all. Michael would declare bankruptcy, maybe finally get help for his addiction. My parents would either accept my terms or lose everything trying to fight me. But sitting there on that bench, watching the waves crash against the shore, I realized something I didn't care what they chose anymore. I'd spent 29 years trying to earn their love, their respect, their acknowledgement that I mattered. Tonight, I'd finally understood that their approval was worthless currency in the economy of my life. I'd won not because I'd destroyed them, but because I'd freed myself from needing them at all. The next morning, the Cleveland Plain Dealer would run a story about the Carter family crisis. By Monday, the business world would be buzzing with rumors and speculation. But that night, in the silence by the lake, there was just me, Emily Carter, the daughter who wasn't supposed to inherit anything, sitting with the empire she'd built from spite and strategy, from patience and pain. I pulled out the note from Grandpa Joseph one more time, reading it in the dim light of my phone. The truth is already in your hands. Don't let them silence you. I didn't. Grandpa, I whispered to the wind. I didn't let them silence me. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, not at the family table, not in their shadow, but standing in my own light, casting my own shadow, building my own legacy. The room had gone silent when I revealed my truth. But that silence wasn't defeat. It was the sound of a new beginning. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. I love connecting with listeners from around the world. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my situation? I read every comment and would love to hear your perspective.